the perfect protocol, in my opinion, for TRT in terms of both safety and results you'll get from it. The perfect one for me is... What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's Jacob, Sunday Lifters. Today we are going to be doing a sort of part 2 to a video I did a couple of months back now, I think maybe 6-8 weeks ago, something like that, covering testosterone replacement therapy, and in my opinion sort of like maybe all the things you'd need to know before considering going on testosterone replacement therapy, but certainly outlining the safest practices when it comes to doing testosterone replacement therapy. I'm going to link the video here that I did preceding this one, guys. It is my recommendation that you watch that one first before watching this, whereas in that video we sort of focused a lot around testosterone itself. This video is going to be more focused around measuring the hormones around testosterone that might be affected by testosterone replacement therapy, things like estradiol, things like sex hormone binding globulin, things like HDL cholesterol, FSH, LH, you name it. Then right at the end of the video, guys, I'm just going to lay out in the style of a formula what I believe the safest and best TRT protocol 99.9% of men can adopt. Of course, there are always exceptions to the rule, so like I say, it's best for most people, but it's not going to be the case for everyone. Before I get into the meat of this episode, guys, if you could just drop it a like, a comment, and consider subscribing if you're not already, it's hugely appreciated. It does help this channel grow. So in video 1, guys, I recommended that you get some specific bloods done, some biomarkers measured before you start a TRT protocol. Those biomarkers were free testosterone, total testosterone, estradiol, SHBG, and also LH and FSH as well, if you could afford to do so. Now, in order to keep your free and total testosterone in range, what you would need to do is use your blood work from before you started as a sort of benchmark, a guide for where you need to go in terms of dosage. Now, if you're doing this in coordination with a doctor, they will help you find your starting dose. If they're a good doctor, they'll start you lower and then move you up as time goes on, depending on if you need to go up. If, let's say they start you on 120 milligrams per week, and that's enough, they won't put you up. Generally speaking, the lower your natural test level, the higher you have, the more room you have to play with to start on a slightly higher dose. Again, it's not the strategy I would employ personally, but that is the case. If you're at sort of like nearly hypergonadal levels of testosterone, like let's just say 50 nanograms per deciliter, which is insanely low, you have a bit more room to play with than somebody who's just, I don't know, a couple of nanograms per deciliter shy of 260 or something. If you were at a higher set point, let's just say, I don't know, 500 nanograms per deciliter, and you're starting TRT, I don't know why you would, but some people might. You might as well just do a blast and get it over with, to be honest, because if you've got that sort of level of testosterone, you probably don't need to be on TRT, let's be honest. So anyway, the point is, start on a dose, let's say it's 120, you run that for 4 to 6 weeks, and then you get your bloods done again, and then you check to see if total and free testosterone are in range, and then based on that blood work you can decide whether you want to adjust the dosage in terms of how many milligrams of testosterone you're doing in a week. Let's say you're slightly below the total testosterone you want to be at, you'd obviously up the dose slightly, or if you are way above where you thought you was going to be, you want to bring that dose down. You keep repeating that process every 4 to 6 weeks of getting your blood work done, checking what the testosterone's at. Use the quantitative data to decide whether you need to keep your protocol the same or adjust it either up or down in terms of dosage. You can also use the qualitative data, which in this instance is how you feel on the amount of testosterone you're doing. you know, it's just as valuable to sort of use as a metric, because it's quite a nuanced area of medicine. So like I say, you keep repeating the process every 4 to 6 weeks, and then you'll find the sweet spot of where you feel good and hopefully it looks good on paper. SHBG, now no matter how good your protocol is, your SHBG is gonna decrease slightly when you start doing exogenous testosterone. The best strategy for stopping SHBG getting lower when you start a TRT protocol is by doing it daily and microdosing it, mimicking almost that sort of natural release of testosterone we have in the morning, where it gets its highest, it's released, and then it decreases slowly throughout the day. We want to mimic that, and that's what kind of the microdosing thing does. What we tend to find is, without these big peaks and troughs in free testosterone and sort of estradiol, DHT, all these sort of sex hormones, SHBG does not take the same hit as it would if you were doing sort of higher doses twice a week like the current protocols. Estradiol, now for most men who start TRT, estradiol shouldn't be a problem, especially if you're adopting the daily sort of microdosing protocol that I have recommended, and many cutting edge clinics are recommending these days. If you're adopting that, you shouldn't have too much problem with aromatization and therefore more estradiol. However, there are a small percentage of men who you know, will have issues. One thing you could consider doing is a subcutaneous injection. What we notice is when people do testosterone sub-Q injections, which you can do with the smaller dosages, the smaller amount of liquids being injected that you do see with a sort of daily administration, you don't aromatize as much. Now there are some considerations, and a sub-Q injection isn't for everybody. The more adipose tissue or fat you're storing, it does interfere somewhat with the absorption of the testosterone. So if you are somebody who is on TRT but has a higher percentage of body fat, you might want to consider sticking with the intramuscular injection. If you're using Sustanon, the sort of higher levels of the benzo alcohol content, which is used as a preservative in the ester, it does not sit well basically when people do sub-Q injections. It can be quite painful. Testosterone enanthate seems to be okay in the majority of people. Again, some find that they get lumps because enanthate is quite a thick ester. So occasionally some people do have a bad reaction to that. It's worth keeping an eye on. If you do use enanthate, you decide to do sub-Q injections, just keep an eye on it. If you notice it start getting itchy, injection sites getting itchy or red, make sure you do see a doctor about that, just to make sure it definitely doesn't get infected. Cypionate is always the best option. It's a very, well, it's not very viscous, the ester, at all. It's basically like water. It's perfect for when you're using a insulin syringe to do your injections, and also just perfect for sub-Q, just because, like I say, it's not a very thick ester. It's not very viscous at all. Has a low benzo alcohol content. So cypionate all the way. Other than the style of injection, so intramuscularly or sub-Q, you can, you know, stop drinking alcohol, drink more water throughout the day, get regular exercise, diet, clean up your diet. All of these things will play a role in sort of how much aromatization and ultimately how much estradiol you have at the end of the day, basically. What we'll find is there is a very, very small percentage of people who might need to consider an aromatase inhibitor or a estrogen blocker or antagonist, but that we're talking a very, very, very small amount of people. Now moving on to FSH and LH, which is follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Both of these hormones, when you start TRT, the use of exogenous testosterone, you will shut down the natural production, interfering with the negative feedback loop that essentially produces FSH and LH in us. And this is another reason why jumping on TRT is not just a safe way to do steroids. It does have real implications, and when you start, your FSH and your LH will essentially go to zero. So the hypothalamus in our brain releases GnRH, which is gonadotropin releasing hormone. That makes its way to the pituitary, and there sort of LH and FSH are synthesized. Once created, they make their way down to the sex organs, obviously in men that being the testes, and they sort of interact with the Leydig cells in the testes. This is ultimately the process that creates testosterone. Now, FSH and LH work in unison to, like I say, create testosterone and also keep a man fertile. When somebody starts testosterone replacement therapy or using any sort of exogenous testosterone or androgens for that matter, your body will sense, the pituitary will sense there's already free testosterone in the blood circulating the system, and therefore the negative feedback loop between the GnRH that's released, go into the pituitary to stimulate and synthesize FSH and LH, which make their way down to the testes. Like we've just said, that doesn't happen anymore, and so natural testosterone shuts down the production of it, and also men are no longer fertile. So to stop men, especially younger men who start TRT, from having fertility problems, what I would always say is you need to run HCG alongside your testosterone. Don't just do testosterone monotherapy. Introduce HCG being human chorionic gonadotropin, and it is another injectable, unfortunately. But what HCG does is essentially mimic the effects of luteinizing hormone. HCG will sort of bind to the LH receptors, and in a simplified way, it will mimic the process that luteinizing hormone and FSH facilitate. And in pretty much all of men who use this properly, not always, it does depend on the individual, as with everything, but most men will get their fertility back. Now, for most people, a daily sub-Q injection of HCG at 100 IUs is enough to facilitate and restore fertility in those who have sort of had the shutdown of their LH and FSH. Now, if you are on testosterone monotherapy, or you have been for quite some time, most physicians, if you go to them, will tell you to come off TRT before they start you on HCG. They won't run the two alongside each other, which I just think is poor, man. This needs to be reviewed and become standard practice to get, especially, like I say, if you're an older guy and you're not going to have children, you're in your 50s, something like that, probably worth having a conversation with your doctor. And if you don't want kids, then fair enough. But for younger guys, I can't believe anyone in their right mind would tell you to come off TRT before you start implementing HCG. It's just absurd. TRT is a lifelong therapy. You don't just come off it. The last thing I'm going to touch on is cholesterol. You should be keeping an eye on your cholesterol anyway, because it's a good indicator for cardiovascular health, as is things like C-reactive protein, etc. But what tends to happen with people who start TRT is that HDL takes a little bit of a hit. Again, administration frequency will play a big role in how much it gets affected. But if you do have any troubles with your cholesterol, and you do a blood test and your LDL is a little bit higher, or your HDL is a little bit lower than you want, consider all the usual things that is suggested, like regular exercise, cleaning up the diet, but also I'll link the video. Check out getting some ezetimibe that you can take daily, 10 milligrams. It's not even noticeable, and it does have a great effect on your lipids, so it's definitely an ancillary I'd recommend. That's all I'm going to say on cholesterol, guys. It's quite well known, different ways you can produce that. You can look at citrus bergamot as a supplement to take. There's other ones as well. Fish oil is great for controlling lipids. Finally, to end the video, I'm just going to give in a sort of really simple way a formula of what I think is the perfect protocol, in my opinion, for TRT in terms of both safety and results you'll get from it. The perfect one for me is, and I'm going to use a formula because I can't say it's perfect to do 250 milligrams a week or 100 milligrams per week, because that depends on the individual. So it would be X amount of testosterone cypionate injected daily subcutaneously alongside 100 IUs of HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, also injected daily subcutaneously. And for 99.9% of men who do TRT, that is going to be the perfect protocol. But yeah, there's always the exception to the rule. Like I say, if you're someone with more adipose tissue, sub-Q injections might not be the best option. Perhaps you just don't get on with the carrier oil in cypionate. Can't actually remember what it is now, if I'm being honest, but the point is you might be better on an anthate just because of the ingredients. You just might not get on with it. There's a lot of things to consider. There's always nuance with this type of thing, and that's why doctors, good doctors, good physicians will spend a lot of time getting to know your individual case and making decisions based on the information you give them, based on your own biomarkers, based on how you feel. Like I say, the qualitative data is just as important as the quantitative data in a lot of cases. So I hope you found something in this video useful, guys. If you did and you haven't already, a like, a comment and a subscription is always greatly appreciated. If you want to follow me on my socials, it's at Sunday Lifters on Instagram and Facebook, and you can email me at sundaylifters@gmail.com for coaching and workout plans. Cheers for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you back here again very soon.